The building was huge, made of glass and steel, and it felt cold even in the middle of summer. For Elias, this place wasn't a symbol of success or power. It was just where he worked. He was the night janitor. While the business people in their fancy suits went home to their big houses, Elias stayed behind. He pushed a heavy cart filled with cleaning supplies, moving from floor to floor, trying to make the dirt disappear so everything would look perfect when the sun came up. Elias was tired. It was a deep kind of tired that sleep didn't really fix. He was a single dad, and life had been hard on him lately. His daughter was sick at home, needing expensive medicine and constant care. Every hour he spent scrubbing these floors was for her. He didn't complain about it because complaining didn't pay the bills, but the weight of it sat heavy on his shoulders. His back ached, and his hands were rough and dry from the strong chemicals he used every night. It was almost 10 o'clock. The building was quiet, save for the hum of the air conditioning. Elias had finished the main conference rooms and the bathrooms. Now he pushed his cart into the grand lobby. This was the fanciest part of the whole building. The floor was shiny white marble, and in the center of the room stood a beautiful grand piano. It was black and shiny, looking more like a piece of art than an instrument. There was a sign on it that said, "*, please do not touch." *, usually Elias just walked past it. He would wipe the dust off the lid and keep moving. But tonight, something made him stop. Maybe it was the silence, or maybe he was just exhausted enough to let his guard down. He set down his cleaning rag and sat on the bench. He didn't plan to play a concert. He just wanted to rest his legs for a minute. He placed his hands on the keys. They felt cool and smooth. Elias hadn't played properly in years, not since before his life got so complicated. Music used to be his escape, a happy memory from when his wife was still alive. He hesitated, then pressed down on a chord. The sound rang out, loud and clear in the empty lobby. It echoed off the high ceilings. It felt good. He started to play a simple, slow melody. It wasn't a famous song, just something he was making up as he went along. The music was sad but sweet. For a few minutes, Elias wasn't a janitor scrubbing floors. He wasn't a worried father stressing over hospital bills. He was just a man playing music. He closed his eyes, letting his fingers find the notes, feeling the stress leave his body. But he wasn't as alone as he thought. Down the long hallway, a young girl was walking slowly. She was holding a white cane, tapping it gently against the floor to find her way. She had dark glasses over her eyes. She had wandered away from her nanny, who was busy on a phone call in the lounge. The girl wasn't lost. She was just following the sound. To her, the piano was a voice calling out in the darkness of the hallway. She followed the music until she reached the lobby entrance. She stood there, listening, swaying slightly to the rhythm. She didn't want to interrupt. She just wanted to be near the sound, and there was someone else there too. Standing in the shadows near the elevators was a woman in a sharp business suit. This was Alina. She owned the building. She was the CEO, one of the most powerful people in the city. She had just finished a meeting that went way too late and was heading to the parking garage. She stopped when she heard the music. She looked at her watch, wondering who was still in the building. She expected it to be one of the professional musicians she sometimes hired for events. But when she looked into the lobby, she saw a man in a blue jumpsuit sitting at the piano. It was Elias, the janitor she passed in the hallways sometimes, but never really looked at. Alina started to walk over to tell him to stop. It was late, and he should be cleaning, not playing with the expensive furniture. But as she got closer, she saw the young blind girl standing a few feet away from the piano, listening with a look of pure peace on her face. Alina stopped in her tracks. She knew that girl. That was her daughter. Alina stayed hidden behind a large marble pillar. She didn't make a sound. She watched the tired man in the janitor's uniform and her blind daughter, connected by the music floating through the cold, empty room. She didn't say a word. She just listened. The music drifted through the air like a soft fog, filling the huge, empty lobby. Elias let his eyes close, his fingers moving gently over the black and white keys. For a moment, he forgot about the ache in his back and the heavy bucket of dirty water waiting for him. He was just lost in the sound. He didn't realize that the little girl was getting closer. The young girl moved carefully, tapping her white cane against the hard floor. Tap, tap, tap. To anyone else, the lobby was just a big open space full of expensive furniture and cold marble. But to her, it was a map of sounds and echoes. The music was pulling her in. She followed the melody like a string, walking until she was standing right next to the piano. Elias felt a presence near him. The sudden stop of the tapping sound made him jump. He pulled his hands back from the keys, as if he had touched a hot stove, and the music stopped abruptly. The silence rushed back in, loud and heavy. His heart started beating fast. He looked up, terrified he was about to get fired. He expected to see a security guard or an angry manager yelling at him for touching the company property instead. He saw a little girl standing there. She was small, wearing a pretty dress and dark glasses. She stood very still, her head tilted slightly to the side, listening for the sound to start again. "I am so sorry," Elias stammered, standing up quickly and grabbing his cleaning rag. "I didn't mean to disturb anyone. I was just leaving." The girl didn't move. She smiled a little. "You play beautifully," she said softly. Her voice was quiet, but it echoed in the big room. "Are you going to play more?" Elias looked at his dirty uniform and then at the expensive piano. "I really shouldn't be touching this," he mumbled, feeling embarrassed. "It's not for me." "My mother says music is for everyone who has a heart," the girl replied. She reached out, her small hand searching for the bench. "Do you know Clair de Lune?" "It means moonlight. It is my favorite song in the whole world." Elias froze. He did know that song. He used to play it for his own wife when they were young and didn't have much money. They would sit by the window and listen to the rain. Hearing the request from this stranger made his chest feel tight. He looked at the girl's empty, searching eyes and realized she couldn't see him judging himself. She only heard the music. I think I remember it," Elias said slowly. "Please?" she asked. "I haven't heard anyone play the piano in a long time. Not since I got sick." Something inside Elias shifted. The rules about not touching the piano and the fear of his boss didn't seem so important anymore. He sat back down on the bench. "Okay," he whispered. "Come sit. There is room." The girl felt her way around the edge of the piano and sat down next to him. She smelled like flowers and shampoo. Elias took a deep breath and placed his hands on the keys. He started to play the first slow, sad notes of the song. After a few seconds, the girl joined in. She didn't need to see the keys. She played the higher notes, a light, twinkling sound that danced on top of the deep notes Elias was playing. It was like they were having a conversation without speaking. The two of them sat there. Side by side, the tired janitor with calloused hands and the rich blind girl. They were from two completely different worlds, but for that moment, they were in the same world. A world of melody and peace. Elias forgot about his money problems. The girl forgot about her blindness. They just played. Elias looked down at his hands, moving next to hers. It reminded him so much of his own daughter at home that he felt a tear roll down his cheek, but he kept playing. He poured all his love and worry into the music, making the song sound full and deep. Neither of them heard the high heels clicking on the marble floor near the door. Neither of them saw the tall woman standing in the shadows, watching them with a hand over her mouth. The woman who usually only cared about profits and meetings stood completely still. She saw her daughter, smiling and happy, sitting next to a man she paid minimum wage to clean floors. She realized she had never seen her daughter look so free. The ruthless CEO didn't interrupt. She just watched and listened, feeling something crack open inside her own heart. The last note of the song floated up to the high ceiling and slowly faded away, leaving the lobby in a deep, heavy silence. It wasn't an awkward silence, though. It was the kind of quiet that happens after something really special. When nobody wants to be the first one to speak and ruin the moment. Elias sat still on the bench, his hands resting on his knees. He took a deep breath, trying to calm the beating of his heart. For a few minutes, he hadn't been a tired janitor. He had been a musician. But as the echo of the piano died down, reality came rushing back in. He looked at his uniform. He looked at the cleaning cart nearby. He knew he had overstepped. He turned to the little girl sitting next to him. She had a small smile on her face, her head tilted as if she was still hearing the music in her mind. "You were really good," she said softly, turning her sightless eyes toward him. "You play with so much feeling. It's like you are telling a story." Elias felt his face get hot. "Thank you," he said, his voice raspy. "You are very good too. You have a gift." He paused for a second, feeling a wave of sadness wash over him. "You remind me of my daughter. She loves music too." The girl's smile grew wider. "Does she play the piano?" "She tries," Elias said. "But she is very sick right now, so she has to stay in bed most of the time. I play for her when I get home, if I'm not too tired." Just then, the silence of the lobby was broken by a frantic, high-pitched voice coming from the hallway. "Miss, where are you?" A woman came rushing into the lobby. It was the nanny. She was looking around wildly, her eyes wide with panic. She was holding a phone in one hand and a handbag in the other. When she spotted the little girl sitting on the piano bench next to Elias, the nanny stopped and let out a loud breath of relief. But almost immediately, her relief turned into a look of sharp annoyance. She marched over, her heels clicking loudly on the floor. "Oh, thank goodness," the nanny said, grabbing the girl by the arm. "I turned my back for 1 second to make a call, and you run off. You know you aren't supposed to be in here alone." She turned her glare toward Elias. "And you. What do you think you were doing?" Elias jumped up from the bench, feeling like a child who had been caught with his hand in the cookie jar. I'm sorry, ma'am." She just walked in. "I was just cleaning. I don't care what you were doing," the nanny snapped, pulling the girl away from the piano. "You shouldn't be interacting with her. You have no idea who she is. This is completely inappropriate." If the boss finds out, Elias's stomach dropped. He knew exactly who the girl was now, or at least he could guess. Only the family of the owner or the top executives would be allowed in this building at this hour. "I'm sorry," he said again, grabbing his cleaning cart. "It won't happen again. I was just leaving." He started to push his cart toward the service exit, wanting to disappear before he got into real trouble. He kept his head down, staring at the floor. He felt ashamed. He had let himself get lost in the moment and forgotten his place. Now he was going to get reported, and if he lost this job, he didn't know how he would pay for his daughter's medicine. But then, the little girl twisted her arm free from the nanny's grip. She didn't move toward the hallway. Instead, she turned her face toward the dark corner near the elevators, where the shadows were the deepest. "Mommy?" she asked, her voice innocent and clear. "You were there the whole time, weren't you?" Elias stopped, pushing his cart. He froze. He slowly turned around to look where the girl was looking. The nanny gasped and put a hand over her mouth, instantly standing up straighter and smoothing down her clothes. From the shadows, a woman stepped forward. She was tall and wearing a sharp, tailored gray suit. Her hair was pulled back perfectly, and she walked with the kind of confidence that made people move out of her way. It was the CEO. Elias had seen her face on the covers of business magazines and on posters in the lobby. But he had never been this close to her. She looked intimidating. Her face was usually cold and serious in photos, and in person she looked even more stern. Elias's heart hammered against his ribs. He was dead meat. He had touched the CEO's daughter. He had played the CEO's piano. He gripped the handle of his cart so hard his knuckles turned white. He waited for her to yell. He waited for her to call security. The CEO walked past the nanny without even looking at her. She walked right up to the piano. She looked at her daughter, then she looked at Elias. Elias wanted to look away, but he forced himself to keep his eyes down, showing respect. I am so sorry, ma'am," Elias stammered, his voice shaking. "I didn't mean any harm. I was just cleaning the instrument, and she asked me to play. I know I'm not supposed to touch it. Please don't fire me. I really need this job." The lobby was so quiet you could hear a pin drop. The nanny looked ready to jump in and defend herself, shifting the blame entirely onto the janitor. But the CEO raised a hand, silencing the nanny. The CEO looked at Elias's trembling hands. She saw the rough skin, the cleaned-under fingernails, and the old stains on his uniform. She saw a man who was scared, Then she looked back at her daughter, who was still standing by the piano bench, looking happy and relaxed. That was Claire de Lune, the CEO said. Her voice wasn't loud, but it was strong. I haven't heard her play that since she lost her sight. Elias nodded, afraid to speak. Who taught you to play like that? She asked. It sounded like a genuine question, not an interrogation. My wife, Elias said honestly. She passed away a few years ago. Music was her language. I just try to keep it alive. The CEO studied his face for a long moment. The anger Elias expected never came. Instead, her expression softened. The hard lines around her mouth seemed to relax. She looked at the dirty cleaning cart and then at the priceless piano, bridging the gap between the two worlds in her mind. She realized that the man who cleaned her building had just given her daughter something that all her money and nannies couldn't. She didn't fire him. She simply nodded, a slow, thoughtful nod. My daughter is difficult to impress, she said quietly. She must have heard something special in you. Elias stood there, gripping the handle of his cleaning cart until his knuckles turned white. He was waiting for the other shoe to drop. In his experience, people with money didn't just let things slide. He had broken a rule by touching the piano, and he had interacted with a child who wasn't his. He expected the CEO to shout at him, or worse, to tell him to pack up his things and leave. He was already calculating how he would pay for the next batch of medicine for his daughter if he'd lost his job tonight. But the CEO didn't yell. She didn't even look at the nanny, who was still shifting nervously from foot to foot. Instead, she looked at the little girl with a gaze that was full of surprise and something that looked like regret. I haven't seen her smile like that in a very long time, the woman said, her voice quieter now. She turned her attention back to Elias. You play with a lot of emotion. It's rare. Elias looked down at his boots. It helps, he mumbled. My daughter is at home. She's been very sick lately. When I play, it helps her forget the pain for a little while. And I guess it helps me too. CEO nodded slowly. She seemed to really be listening to him, not just hearing words. I understand what it means to worry about a child, she said. But I have a whole team of doctors and helpers, and I still feel helpless most of the time. I can't imagine doing it alone. I'm not alone, Elias said softly, thinking of his neighbors and the few friends he had. We manage. You just have to keep going. There was a silence between them that wasn't uncomfortable anymore. It was a shared moment of understanding between two parents who loved their daughters more than anything else in the world. The CEO looked at Elias's rough, calloused hands, hands that scrubbed floors all night, but were gentle enough to coax beautiful music out of a piano. She looked at her own manicured hands. Hands that signed million-dollar contracts but couldn't seem to help her daughter feel happy. The contrast hit her hard. Elias had nothing in the way of material wealth, but he had a gift that was bringing her child joy. She had everything money could buy, but she couldn't give her daughter that moment of peace. You should go home to your daughter, the CEO said suddenly. It's late. Elias blinked. I still have the West Wing to clean, ma'am. The floors. I'll handle the floors, she said firmly, though Elias knew she wouldn't be scrubbing them herself. Just go. Take your cart and go. Elias was too stunned to argue. Thank you, he whispered. He turned his cart around and started walking toward the service exit. He felt like he was walking on air, confused but relieved. As he reached the door, the CEO called out to him. Elias. He stopped and turned around. She knew his name. He wasn't sure how, maybe from his ID badge, but hearing it from her mouth felt strange. Yes, ma'am? Come back tomorrow, she said. At the same time, Elias wasn't sure what she meant. Was she going to fire him then? Or did she want him to clean the lobby again? Okay, he said slowly. She added, I think my daughter needs to hear more of it. Elias nodded, still not fully understanding, and pushed his cart out the door. He walked to the locker room in a daze. When he finally stepped outside into the cool night air, he realized he wasn't fired. In fact, something had changed. He didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, he felt like his talent had been seen not as a nuisance, but as something valuable. Back inside the lobby, the CEO watched the janitor leave. She looked down at her daughter. Do you want to go home, sweetie? Can we come back tomorrow? The little girl asked. I want to play with Elias again. The CEO smiled, a real smile that reached her eyes. "Yes," she said. "We will definitely be back." She made a silent promise to herself right then. She was going to find a way to bridge the gap between their worlds. She wasn't going to let this moment of magic fade away. The next week felt like a blur for Elias. He went to work expecting a punishment or a pink slip. But instead, he found a letter waiting for him at his usual station. It was a thick envelope with the company logo on it. His hands shook as he opened it. He braced himself for bad news. But as he read the words, he had to sit down on his bucket to stop himself from falling over. It wasn't a firing notice. It was a confirmation. First, it said that all the medical bills for his daughter had been paid. Not just the current ones, but all the future treatments covered by a special health fund. Elias had to read that sentence 3 times before the tears made it impossible to see. The weight that had been crushing his chest for years suddenly lifted. He could finally breathe. Second, the letter offered him a new job. He was no longer just the night janitor. The CEO had created a position for him called music curator. His duties were simple. Keep the lobby clean, yes, but also play the piano every evening for an hour. It was a salary that meant he didn't have to work 3 jobs anymore. He could actually be home with his daughter when she woke up. But the biggest surprise came 3 days later. A delivery truck pulled up to a small, run-down apartment building. 2 men carried a heavy, padded item up 3 flights of stairs. They set it down in his living room. It was a beautiful, upright piano. It wasn't brand new, but to Elias, it was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. There was a note on top that just said, *, every home needs music. Keep playing? * 6 months later, the building was hosting its annual charity gala. The lobby was filled with wealthy people in expensive gowns and tuxedos, holding glasses of champagne and talking softly. But the main event wasn't the speeches or the auctions. It was the performance. Elias stood on the small stage set up near the grand piano. He wasn't wearing his janitor's uniform anymore. He was wearing a nice suit that actually fit him. He looked out at the crowd and saw his own daughter sitting in the front row. She looked healthier than she had in years, her cheeks pink and her eyes bright. She was clapping her hands excitedly. Next to her sat the CEO's daughter, the blind girl who had started it all. She was wearing a pretty dress, tapping her cane against the floor to the rhythm of the applause. Elias sat down at the piano. He looked over his shoulder and saw the CEO standing at the back of the room. She was watching him with a proud smile, her arms crossed loosely. She nodded at him to start. He began to play. It was the same song they played that first night, Claire de Lune, but this time it was richer and fuller. After a few moments, the CEO's daughter walked up the steps to the stage. She knew exactly where to go. She sat on the bench next to Elias. The crowd went quiet. Together, the janitor and the young girl played. The music flowed through the room, magical and pure. The wealthy guests stopped talking. They stopped drinking. They just watched and listened. They saw the CEO walk up to the stage and stand behind the 2 of them, resting her hands on her daughter's shoulders. It wasn't a picture of business power. It was a picture of a family that had grown in an unexpected way. As the song ended, the room erupted in applause. But for Elias, the best sound wasn't the clapping. It was the laugh of his daughter in the front row and the smile on the face of the blind girl next to him. He realized that life didn't give him a fair hand. But sometimes, if you keep playing through the pain, the music can change everything. He wasn't just a janitor anymore, and he wasn't alone. He was part of something beautiful.